Hello, fellow learners. Welcome to this episode of an explanation of Alice Walker's Color Purple. I'm going to run you through quickly what the plot of the novel and give a short and quick analysis of it. So, first of all, let's look at her life. Alice Walker's life, who of course is the Black African American writer whose Color Purple has become quite a popular novel. So she was born in 1944 in Georgia, which was a southern state where slavery was practiced. Of course, she is born after the abolition, but we can see, of course, that she, of course, is very aware of the history. She was the eighth and youngest child and was accidentally blinded at the age of 12, which made her a bit of a recluse. She stopped going out, and that's when her parents they gave her a typewriter, recognizing that uh, the 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 kind of you know slight trauma that she felt from the way she believed she looked because of the loss of an eye, and got a scholarship. She went to Spelman College. She later married Melvin Rosenman in 1968, who was an advocate, a civil rights advocate. She, of course, was into the civil rights movement, which was, of course, abolition of slavery was one thing, but getting the black Americans their rights was another uphill task. So that's what brought them together. But they divorced soon, not soon, but 8 years later. Her first book of poetry, called Once, was published in 1969. It is, a year before she went through the traumatic experience of losing a child, a baby, owing to an abortion. So that trauma is also captured in this collection. Her first novel is The Third Life of Grange Copeland. Here she is talking about she has a male protagonist as her, around whom uh, the story revolves. And this was published in 1970. The first collection of short stories, In Love and Trouble: Stories of Black Women, was published in 1973. And of course, many more things, many more publications of poetry and novels followed. She also has published a book called Essay in Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Womanist Prose, which is a collection of critical essays that she has written. And womanist is a term which uh, would probably be new to you, and is a neologism coined by Alice Walker to denote black feminism. Because as you would know, feminism, as it began, it did not take into cognizance the you know the doubly oppressed position of black women. And so in order to bring in a more intersectional attitude around the idea of feminism, Alice Walker coined this term, womanist. She was also very much influenced by Zora Neale Hurston, who she takes probably as her, uh, you know, uh, her literary, I wouldn't say model, but she looks up to her. She sees her as her, one of her four mothers, I would say, as in a literary way. She's written Chicken Diaries, which is about her adventures of, caring for a flock of chicken as she muses on life. The Color Purple, which was published in 1982, won the prestigious Pulitzer Award. It's an epistolary novel. An epistolary novel meaning a novel which is written in the form of a sequence of letters. It can be called a Bildungsroman of sorts because it does trace uh, the protagonist, who's still a teenager from the age of 14 till she's probably 50. So it's far beyond, and her coming of age comes quite late. And it's been adapted by Steven Spielberg in 1985. The setting is in rural Georgia, the early part of the 20th century. Also, there is a shift in setting somewhere in the middle of the novel to West Africa, where the protagonist's sister is. It's about a black family, and it begins in media res, meaning that it begins in the middle. This is a term, in media res, which you might have come across when you've looked at epic poetry. So the what is the novel about? It's about two sisters, Sally and Nettie. They belong to a poor family, a black sharecroppers family, which would be, farmers and small time farmers. And Sally is more central. Of course, Sally and Nettie are the central relationship to begin with. But Sally, of course, is focalized. She is, more at the center than Nettie is. And it is epistolary, not by way of, just structuring the novel, but it's actually, it's justified and it's shown to be the only viable way in which Sally can find an outlet to her emotional turmoil. The novel begins with a very dramatic revelation that Sally is being abused by her father. She's carrying the second child. She was already a mother at 14. She had to drop out of school, and she, uh, has another child by the age of, she's pregnant again by the age of 15. So her father forbids her to speak about the sexual violence that he commits on her. Her father's name is Alfonso. The mother calls him Fonzo, and he tells her that it'll kill your mammy. Now, Sally, being young, she actually takes that literally. She has no one to confide in, and so she takes to writing letters to God. So it's dear God, and then she says that I am, and then she strikes out I am, and she says I have been a good girl. So she is a bit confused about herself. She has come to accept the patriarchal narrative, and so the trauma that she suffers at the hands of her father, the only outlet she has is in the form of those letters that she writes. She is soon married off, but of course, marriage offers no respite. She is married off to a certain man called Mr. Baitselli, but she, of course, was not his first choice. He was interested in Nettie, but the father, who you can see, he was interested in Nettie as well. And Sally, of course, tries to save Nettie from the father. She dresses up and presents herself to him so that he spares Nettie. So she, of course, she is very concerned for her sister. But she ends up having been, she's forced into. She doesn't resist, of course. By now, she has become quite, as she tells later, she becomes wood. Her survival instinct is not ready to react, not to assert herself, just to take things as they are, tolerate them. So this Mister, who we later know is called Albert, he doesn't want to marry Sally. She's supposed to be ugly. While Nettie, and of course, everybody knows that she was pregnant. But after the father doesn't relent, he is not interested in giving Nettie away. And he actually puts in a cow into the bargain. He says that if Mr. marries Sally, he's going to get a cow also. So that way she is bartered into marriage. She, of course, is treated as an object to be, you know, uh, sold in this manner. And Sally, of course, has to work to the bone. She raises Mister's children. She takes care of the house. She takes care of the woods. While Mister seems to be pining only for Shug Avery, who was his first love, who he wanted to marry, but his patriarchal father did not allow him. And she, of course, had singing aspirations. Shug had, and her parents were cited as, probably immoral, whose character was, suspect. Her patrilineage actually was suspect. The father was actually not really known, so which is why Mister is forbidden from marrying her. But he still loves her. When Shug falls terribly ill, he brings her home, and Sally, she tends to her, cares for her, and brings her back to health. Shug initially is very curt with Sally. She's actually mean. She calls her ugly to her face. But soon, Sally, of course, has a very reverential attitude towards her. When she bathes her, she says it's as if, uh, she's worshipping her body. And soon they become very, very close. They become intimate, and they, of course, share a very strong emotional bond. And the years of abuse, which has created an objectified Sally, that it has arrested her growth. All that seems to slowly but surely, uh, you know, change. She starts to heal under Shuk's positive influence. She is not only a good role model, but she is also, very supportive of her. And similarly, there's another female character who uh, comes across as a very strong role model, and that is Sophia, who, Sally herself, can see. She marvels at her Amazon like qualities, and also how Sophia deals with Harpo. So, Harpo, who, as I said, he's the eldest son of Mister. He marries Sophia out of love. He does love her a lot, but out of his misguided notions of being a husband, he of course has seen his father beat up Sally for the better part of his life. He feels that Sophia has to listen to him in, you know, whatever his uh, his way should be the only way. And Sophia, of course, is has a strong mind of her own, and she resists. And Harpo is advised by Sally to beat her. Now, Sally, of course, she is sleepless after that. But Sophia turns out to be more than a match to Harpo, and she meets his physical aggression with, you know, probably more, because Harpo is the one who comes out, uh, you know, the weaker in the bouts that they have. Uh, Somewhere in the middle, we shift to Africa. Sally, who believed that her sister was no more because they had promised that they would write to each other, and Sally had not written to her in a long, long time. So, also, her babies were taken away from her by her father when she was very young, when they were, babies, and she believed that they had died too. But of course, when she discovers the letters from Seti, which Mister had been hiding from her, because of Shug's help, she gets to discover those letters. She realizes that Nettie is alive. Mister, of course, was trying to, you know, punish Nettie for not, uh, you know, uh, reciprocating his advances. Anyhow, She learns. So this switch in narrative, this geographical and cultural shift, it is seen as a bit abrupt by some. It doesn't really fit in with the rest of the narrative, but it does actually. One can justify it. One can see there is an extension of the same themes. For instance, sexism, which the characters face in Africa, and is pretty much the same, where the tribal people, the Olinka, don't want their girls to be educated. They feel that women don't need to know everything. Also, how African Americans, when they go to Africa, they want to see some sense of connection. They probably want to feel a sense of brotherhood, but the Africans over there don't really look at them as kin. So the sense of isolation that they feel there as well, the African Americans, just as they do feel it in white society. So there is a universality of the theme of gender inequality, and uh, Sally's narrative, of course, allows for sorry. So there's a switch to Nettie's letters, and it allows for Sally's greater sense of a restoration of uh, normalcy. The resolution comes with Sally discovering that the father who abused her was actually not her biological father. He was the stepfather, and also that she gets back her house and the adjoining land. So she has a house of her own. She is established as she has a small company where she stitches pants, so she is financially independent. She also comes to have Albert, her ex-husband of sorts, who was initially referred to her by Mr. She now calls him Albert. So it shows it's a marker of her growth. Earlier on, her father was a him with a capital H. Her husband was a Mr. But now her husband is Albert, so she now sees them not as patriarchal figures of who dominate over her in what was more like a master slave relationship where she was abused and she was physically and she was beaten up, she was raped, and she was misused. But now she is on equal terms with her husband, her ex-husband, who she can now call Albert, who has also reformed himself. She Shug, who had left her for a young boy, Germain, who's 19 years old, she returns to Selly. So everything that, and also Nettie, who was returning from Africa and seemed to have, whose ship seemed to have got lost, she returns safe and sound with Selly's children. So they come back, and this sort of, it's like there is a cosmic magnet which brings everybody together in a very happy ending. Sophia and Harper, who were estranged, they too get back together. Of course, not before Sophia has to suffer tremendously in jail for having, you know, for not allowing white people to, treat her inappropriately, or to expect her to be, a servant to them. And some critics find the ending very unrealistic. It's like a fairy tale ending with all the aggressors transformed into beautiful people, and of course, Sally's family being complete with everybody. After all the odds, everything is hunky dory. But of course, the novel is in the subtitle. It was called a moral tale. So very clearly, even though there is a realistic, uh, you know. Character to it because of mostly the way in which things are narrated, also the kind of language, African American vernacular vernacular English that is used. But that does not mean that it is a realistic novel. And as a moral tale, it does serve to offer, an answer to the kind of oppression and the ills that Sally faces, and there that does exist in Black society. So the themes of the novel are, first of all, it is a celebration of an unconventional way of looking at God and religion, because both Nettie and Sally come to the conclusion that the way in which they have read the Bible, in which they cannot find, it's a very racist. There's only a white God and white people. So they realize that Shug explains to Sally that God is not to be feared. God loves everyone, and God loves for everyone to enjoy themselves. So she tells her, and that's where probably the name of the title comes from, that it pisses God off if you walk by the fields and you don't appreciate the color purple. So life is about living it up, enjoying yourself, even sexual pleasure, George Swans, as the critics would say, the kind that as Shug tells her, it's something which pleases God, which is initially shocking to Sally, but Shelley too comes to embrace this pantheistic sense of God in everything, and of not a punishing religion, but a religion which is a spiritual connect with God, and uh, that's the way in which Sally comes to see God, and she grows from her restricted sense of the Christian God. We see the power of female solidarity, how Sally and Sophia and Shuk together they take on the oppressors, they are able to overcome them, how it helps to heal each other. So the female continuum, the relationships that they have, whether it's sisterly, whether they're as lovers or as uh, you know yeah, sisters or lovers, or even as a baby and the mother, it all shows a strong connect, and a subculture which helps them survive, not just survive but also take on patriarchal aggression. It also shows how violence kills. That's what Sophia says of Mr. Because Mr. suffers a lot. He goes through a trauma from all that he has done, probably from the meanness that he had, uh, you know, uh, the meanness that he had embraced. And it's only when he gives away the last of the letters that he has kept from Sally, and when he consciously tries to change, become a better man, do all sorts of things, go to the fields. He, of course, had left doing all that. When he recovers to become more human and he becomes, whole again. So meanness kills, that's what the message is. It also is a message of the power of narrative, how Sally survives because she's able to write those letters, and uh, also the kind of narrative, the kind of language she uses. It shows her, the richness of the African American vernacular language, English, and Alice Walker, who wrote a full length novel in it. She shows it can sustain. It has the richness in it to write such a meaningful and to carry such a strong message in such a poetic manner. It shows the disruption of gender roles, traditional gender roles. For instance, the novel seems to be suggesting that human beings are more androgynous, and one should not divide uh, people on, according to gender expectations. Harpo makes a good dishwasher. He does the dishes very well. He looks after the kids very well. He's more of a, someone who likes to stay at home, while Sophia is very good at the fields or with physical exertion, and she enjoys that role more. Similarly, Mr. who liked sewing as a child, he is distanced from it because he was made fun of. So actually, these things should not be, separated from, all human beings, irrespective of their sex. They should, uh, you know, uh, do all sorts of things. There should be no division of labor. And of course, the advocacy of pants as something which even women can wear, which was seen as radical in the beginning, it is come to be accepted as something which is quite, not only does it enhance the sex appeal of women, but it's also more allows for gender fluidity, fluidity of movement, which dresses, of course, do not allow. It also shows how women are, the unconventional creative expression that women are, which is not appreciated, but which this novel appreciates a lot. For instance, it refers to the writing, it showcases the writing skills of Sally, even in her own language, because letter writing is not considered to be a very, a literary way of writing, or whether it is quilting or whether it is sewing. All of these activities are shown to be creative and should be, they should be given the same kind of, weightage, or the same kind. They should be not de-glamorized or, uh, you know uh, reduced to nothing just because they're not about, you know the kind of arts which we associate as being more creative, such as, painting and writing, and singing, of course, is something which women are shown to be very expressive in. And also, of course, the endemic nature of sexism and racism, which crosses borders. And so that's a quick, you know, recap of the themes. So I hoped you have benefited from this lesson. Thank you.